Hello, this is a continuation of the Madam Manhwa. Please like and comment to help promote the video. Also, subscribe to Patreon, where videos are released earlier and without censorship. Many of you are already there. Thank you so much for your support. Also, check out Facebook to stay connected in case the channel is blocked. I post uncensored art there. Well, let's get started. Last time, everything ended when Sohee was about to open the door to the shed where her servants were up to dirty things. Dalso noticed this and quickly hid Uriam in the hay. Upon entering, the mistress found the half-naked hero lying on it and turned away. While the guy was trying to get dressed, he noticed that his girlfriend's head was visible and covered her with his back, causing his pants to fall down again. Then Sohee looked at his Excalibur and couldn't believe her eyes. In her mind, all she could think was that he was once again doing it, thinking about her. The hero, on the other hand, noticed that the lady was looking there and became embarrassed. She slowly approached and sat down, thinking that if she touched his dignity, Dalso would like it. The girl, taking her time, reached out to him, and time seemed to freeze for both of them. However, she regained control and simply put her pants on him. The lady considered herself foolish because they were alone, yet she still lacked the courage to go through with it. Then she asked him about what she had told him yesterday, clarifying whether he had told anyone about it. The guy replied that he hadn't and suggested dealing with it tonight when everyone was asleep. So he stated that she would tell him the date later, and left. After her departure, Uriam emerged from hiding, and Dalso apologized to her for what had happened. She asked him what they had talked about and what he was planning to do with the lady at night. Nervously, Dalso explained that he couldn't tell her because she had asked him to keep it a secret, but he assured Uriam that there was nothing indecent about it, and that the mistress was different. Upset, Uriam ordered him to leave and then pondered whether the general's daughter could marry anyone with a high status, so why a servant? And why Dalso? Meanwhile, Hyung went somewhere with the head servant and asked where they were going. The servant began to tell him a story about a man who transported people across the river. He didn't work in rainy weather, but a high-ranking noble urgently needed to cross the river, so he offered him double pay. The carrier had to risk his life because a nobleman needed to attend a celebration, but in the end, he was swept away, and he didn't even live to see the birth of his daughter. Now, they are heading to meet the widow and her child, who are also servants but live separately and seem to be involved in some other line of work. Our guys need to retrieve something from them. After traveling for some time, they arrived at their destination, and a woman came out, delighted to see them. Here, we learn that the head servant is called Deokchun. She grabbed his hand and mentioned that it was too hot today, so they should come inside the house. Hyun looked at them in confusion because he never would have thought that this old man had such a good job, that they were so happy to see him and even invited him into their home. Later, both enjoyed lunch, and the young man was even more surprised when they were served some cookies. While the widow served drinks, Deokchun stared at her ass, and afterward, she sat next to him, clearly hinting at some privacy. The women handed them a single bedsheet, though they were supposed to receive two. Hyun asked, "Why is that?" To which the head servant said that young people these days are so heartless. It's hard to be a widow and live alone in the wilderness, so one should be kinder. The guy looked at him with disgust, recalling the incident when he killed an old man over 70 years old. Then, Deokchun told him to go get some fresh air, while he stayed to talk to the lady alone. After some time, the young man passed the time wandering around and contemplating what a jerk the head servant was. Moans began to reach him. He noted that the widows were curvy, beautiful faces, and decided to peek. He looked through the opening in the door and understood why Deokchun hurried here. While he was deep in thought, a girl who appeared next to him caught his attention. Hyun, in shock, asked her who she was, and she introduced herself as Yeon, the widow's daughter. The story of this girl unfolds. She loved a guy named Palpoon who promised to make her the happiest woman, but their love didn't have a chance to grow into something more. Palpoon was beaten by his mother and forced to flee. Yeon cried and wondered why, as he was a good person. Her mother replied that her father was also a good person, but such people are not suitable anywhere. Therefore, she needed to find someone normal. Every time Yeon liked someone, her mother would drive him away. But on the day when the daughter had lost all hope of getting married, fate showed her a path. The first guy approved by her mother arrived, and she explained that Deokchun was preparing him for the role of the next leader, so it was a pretty good option. Therefore, she was ordered to captivate him immediately. Yeon hesitated, but her mother scolded her, saying that she had already entertained herself with riffraff, so she needed to do everything possible. For example, there to lift the skirt at the right moment. Frightened, the girl agreed and said that she would try her best. Back to the present. At this moment, the widow's daughter shows her legs to Hyung to seduce him. It turns out he is the one Deokchun intended as a replacement. Yeon thought that this young man was very handsome, much better than Palpoon, and she was confused about what to do. She initiated a conversation, mentioning rumors that he was the smartest guy in the area, all the while casually exposing her intimate body part. Hyung found it hard not to look there and replied, "Well, yes, his head is working." In the end, the girl mentioned that when her mother and Deokchun engage in such dirty activity, it takes a lot of time. Since it was hot outside, she invited him to come into her room. Meanwhile, mother looked at the hole and thought everything is fine. She tried to do everything to distract the old man. But for now, her daughter will conquer the heart of the future head. However, Deokchun finishes pretty quickly for the first time, which is why the lady has to resuscitate his device for the second pass with her mouth. Somehow he managed to do it, even though the old man resisted trying to end it. In general, as a result, his widow saddled him again, sucking all the strength out of this elderly man, but all this for the sake of her daughter. Meanwhile, Hyung was cleaning his ears and pondering why the girl was looking at him like that. Unexpectedly, Yeon told him to lie down and asked if she could help clean his ears. As Hyun lay there, he thought that she must have missed male attention so much that her feet felt very soft and tender, and the young man's heart began to beat faster. Then the thought crossed his mind that perhaps this girl was trying to seduce him. He decided to test this and slowly placed his hand on her leg. However, Yeon stopped him and asked, "What is he doing?" Hyun quickly stood up and apologized, explaining that his hand simply slipped down. Our brother pondered. I'll remind you that in this context, slaves refer to each other as brothers and sisters, so I'll use these terms occasionally as well. So the brother wonders if he was wrong when he decided that the widow's daughter was seducing him. But then Yeon lifts her skirt and wonders if he wants to touch her body. Hyung nervously replied that, of course, he wanted to touch her, and after all, he was a man. In the end, she whispered a question about whether he would take responsibility for her. Without hesitation, Hyung answered affirmatively and reached out to her. He pondered, as this girl was the first one to allow him to touch her body. The guy touched her breasts and thought that she was as soft as a tender rice cake. Then he lowered his hands and began to press and rub intensively. He was surprised that it was quite wet there, and Yeon begged not to hurry. But then the brother knocked her to the floor and tore off her jacket, and was about to get down to business when suddenly the girl said that they could not do it yet, but if he married her, she would give herself to him on the first wife night. Hyung agreed and apologized for getting carried away. After some time, they were getting ready to leave, and Yeon told Hyung to make sure he came back to her. Deokchun asked if he liked the girl, as she seemed to look at him with loving eyes. However, Hyung stated that he only liked Yerim and asked if he should talk to the mistress about her. The head servant confirmed that slaves are married off to whoever the master decides, and for a relationship with Yerim, he would have to first wait for Sohee's approval. Deokchun became curious about whether he could achieve anything with her. Hyung replied that on the first night, he would simply show her what it means to be a real man, and she would become obedient after they engaged in such activities on the first night. In the evening, Hyung pondered if there was something going on between his friends when he suddenly saw Yerim coming with a watermelon. He asked if it was for Dalso. She angrily replied no, explaining that he was probably tired after a long journey, so she brought the watermelon for him. Hyung teared up at such care and hugged her under her skirt, saying that he was the only person she cared about. In response, the girl angrily pushed him away, calling him a pervert. Meanwhile, the hero was contemplating how to resolve the misunderstanding with Yerim, and he was still so aroused from what they did in the shed that his Excalibur had not calmed down yet. So the only option is to calm him down with your own hands at the same time. So he was thinking about Dalso. She understood how difficult it was for him to constantly hide to engage with his friend. Moreover, the mistress had caught him in the act, and she felt that he must have been very embarrassed at that moment. Lady Sohee then speculated that if she were not in love with the hero, she would likely have married another man by now. So, in her opinion, Dalso was still alone because of her. Sohee wanted to somehow help him, and an idea struck her. She went outside and asked the same girl as before to find their big brother for her. At that moment, the young man was occupied with his dirty affairs, thinking that no one would come to the shed at this time. By the way, he once again presented his mistress, wondering why it was Sohee and not Yerim. We see a flashback in which Dalso showed Sohee a lizard that she liked. She wanted to catch a similar one, and the hero led her to the river beyond the valley. The little lady tried hard to catch the lizard, but it always slipped from her grasp. In the end, she slipped and fell into the water. It was a memory for the grown-up Sohee. The boy saved her without thinking about his own safety, fearing to lose her, even though he had never swam in such a deep river before and could have died himself. Nevertheless, there was a positive side to all this. She got to experience the warm embrace of Dalso. Now Sohee held a wooden lizard in her hands, a gift from the hero since they couldn't catch a live one that day. She squeezed it and decided that she had to let go of Dalso, even though she loved him. Meanwhile, Dalso continued with his affairs and noticed someone behind him. Upon turning around, He was shocked to see the girl on the dog. He hurriedly put on his pants, and the little girl asked, "What are you doing here?" Dalso replied that he was just itched, and since men scratch their balls much more often in the summer heat. In conclusion, she told him that the lady was looking for him, so he should hurry. When he ran away, the little girl thought it was silly to call Lady Sohee if he itched. Why not just scratch? At that moment, Lady Sohee was thinking that she should tell him to start real, normal relationships, but not with her. After a while, Dalso arrived, and she ordered him to come into the room. The mistress gathered all her courage but couldn't bring herself to say those words to her beloved. Then she started crying. Dalso touched her and asked, "Did I do something that could upset you?" She embraced him and confessed that she didn't want to lose him because they loved each other. He also hugged her back, thinking it felt like a dream, his beloved in his arms, pressing against him, and he could hear her heartbeat, feels her breasts, her body. And suddenly Dalso pulled away, as his Excalibur aroused touched Sohee. And she asked him, does he think about her every day during this? She admitted that she accidentally saw him doing this in the middle of the forest. The hero bowed before her and apologized for committing such a serious offense. But the girl raised him and said that it was very pleasant for her to realize that she was so liked by him. Then Lady Sohee asked, when he becomes bigger, does he need to use his hand to calm himself? And Dalso replied, yes. She said, servants don't have their own rooms, so it was probably difficult to hide it all this time. The guy confirmed this, and then the mistress ordered him to do it right in her room since no one had the right to enter without her permission. She promised to wait for him outside so that he wouldn't hurry. Dalso hesitated, but Sohee insisted on carrying out her order. After some time, the lady sat outside and listened, imagining what he was doing right now in her bed and thinking about her. Suddenly, someone's leg appeared, someone who was looking for their comb. Sohee became worried because she forgot that there was one person who could enter without her permission, and that was her sister Surin. She asked her to move aside to pick her comb. Meanwhile, Dalso was occupied with his fantasies about Lady Sohee, so engrossed in his thoughts that he didn't immediately grasp what could happen next. While the two sisters argued about who would go for the comb in the background, he thought it was happening somewhere far away from him. However, when it finally dawned on him, he was left speechless. Sohee tried her best to prevent Surin from entering, but she still managed to open the door. Inside, she found Dalso half naked and trying to get dressed. The older sister quickly closed the door and told the younger one that it was her choice, and she had the opportunity to engage in such dirty things with whomever she wished. Sohee tried to clarify the misunderstanding, but Surin assured her not to worry and promised not to tell anyone. After she left, Lady Sohee, trembling and crying, said that she hated her. Then she apologized to Dalso, who thought he would die that night, but the girl told him not to worry because her sister wasn't that kind of person. After some time, Surin was training and contemplating what she had seen. Sohee always seemed so innocent to her, and now she was doing this with a slave, which wasn't very acceptable in principle, especially since they weren't even married. Then her thoughts shifted to Dalso's body. She couldn't understand how a servant could have such a physique and such an organ. Fueled by anger at the thought of him, she trained even more vigorously, shouting, "Damn fool, get out of my head." The next day, the hero thought about what happened yesterday with Uriam and how he could apologize to her. He noticed her walking behind and tried to speak, but she emotionally told him not to talk to her. It was the first time Dalso saw her like this, and it became evident that she was very angry. Meanwhile, Sohee reflected on the previous night and how good she felt in her lover's arms. She decided that when the time came and he found his love, she would have to take care of him until then. Then she heard Uriam's voice saying that she brought what she had been asked for. After a while, the servant combed Lady Sohee's hair, and she wanted to find out from her what reputation Dalso had among the others. Uriam replied that he was foolish but strong, and that was a plus. The mistress noted that she thought their brother was popular among others because he was kind and caring. Uriam asked, does she like him? Sohee blushed for a moment and then confessed, saying, yes. This shocked Uriam so much that she even accidentally pulled her hair with the comb. But, of course, later apologized, justifying that it was unintentional. The subsequent hair combing took place in a tense atmosphere. Uriam's hands trembled with jealousy, even though she didn't fully understand the emotions she was experiencing. At the same time, Deokshan introduced Yeonyeon to the lady of the house and said that she would be working there. The madam clarified that servants living separately have more freedom and earn more, so why did she want to move here? The girl replied that she heard they lacked workers, and the mistress praised him for such a decision. The head servant noted that she resembles her mother a lot, and is good at cooking, so it would be best for her to work in the kitchen. After a while, Deokshan mentioned that her mother wasn't the type to send her daughter to such a place, and asked what happened. Yeon explained that she had been begging her mother to let her go, but she refused to give her permission, so she simply ran away while her mother was sleeping, shocking the man. However, the true reason for the girl's arrival was to meet with Hyung. Later, Hyung went to Lady Sohee because he wanted to talk to her about something important, and at that moment, Yeon happened to be passing by. She overheard him saying that he was already 25 years old and would like to get married by the end of the summer. Yeon was surprised to hear this and thought that Hyung would be an honest person if he hadn't forgotten his promise to marry her. However, to her even greater surprise, he asked for permission to marry a girl named Uriam. She was in shock and wondered who this Uriam was. And with that, we will conclude for today. Thank you very much for watching and for your activity under the videos. Thanks to you, the reviews are getting an incredible number of views for a starting channel. Also, a huge thank you to everyone who subscribed to Patreon. Perhaps someday I will be able to fully support myself thanks to your subscriptions, and then the videos will come out even more often. And, of course, don't forget to subscribe to Patreon. Goodbye, everyone.